Hi, my name is Emily Harvey, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. I am a very proud Mason alum. I did my undergraduate degree with a Bachelor's of Arts in Anthropology, and I minored in Women and Gender Studies, as well as African and African American Studies. I also stayed at Mason for my master's, where I did an MA in Cultural Anthropology with a graduate certificate in Women and Gender Studies. So very excited to be participating in this event for Women and Gender Studies. Love them. So a few words on my professional journey up to this point. When I was finishing up grad school at Mason, I began working as a research assistant, research intern type role for a nonprofit. At the nonprofit, it was focused on tobacco research, so research around helping people quit using tobacco products, research around e-cigarettes, flavors, disparities as well. And so I was there for a few years. The research was heavy in public health, but we also utilized qualitative and quantitative methods. I worked with public health specialists as well as sociologists and psychologists, all in that role. So I was there for a few years, and then more recently I worked as a researcher at a military medical school where I did health professions education research as well as medical education research. And I was there for a few years, so we did projects around how med students learn, how health professionals carry out their continued education for their jobs, and it was all under the military context. So that position was also with a nonprofit. I was working at a nonprofit as a DoD contractor at this military medical school. My current position, I am a product insights researcher for Target. So I switched from the nonprofit, academia world to now I'm in the corporate world doing product insights research. And what that means is I am doing research around products. So it's very guest-centered. What are guests looking for? How can I formulate research projects to help answer designers, buyers, other team members at Target's questions about what the guests are looking for in specific products. So that's a very high level of what I'm doing now, as well as my journey to how I got here. So I'll dive right into the questions. The first question is, what specific ideas, theories, or concepts do you use regularly from your Women and Gender Studies classes in your work now? So I do want to say that my responses are going to be around the work that I'm doing now, but also I'm going to mostly talk about the work that I've done at the nonprofits that I've worked at. So what specific ideas, theories, concepts did I use regularly from Women and Gender Studies? One I would definitely say is intersectionality. That is a concept that a lot of the people that I worked with knew about, but it wasn't always being really implemented or always top of mind in the projects that we were working on. So the skills that Women and Gender Studies gave me around intersectionality, I've really been able to leverage and just being hey, let's make sure that we are accounting for multiple identities and how that impacts the participants in the research that we're doing and the questions that we're asking them and how we're asking them and all of those things. Another thing that would fall under specific ideas, theories, or concepts that I have utilized throughout my career would be not removing myself from the research. So always being aware that I play a presence, I play a role in how the research is being conducted and what my impact is on the research that I'm doing. So I know that I do play a role in the research, like my identity, my experiences all play a role in the research, and that's something that is not discounted. And like sometimes that's not an idea that has been readily accessible, especially like when you're looking at like larger scale projects. But it is something that I keep with me and hold on to very tight, that I learned from women and gender studies specifically, was not to like remove myself from the research totally. Like what I bring to the research, my identity, who I am, plays a role in what I do and what comes from the research, the questions that are asked, and all those things. So on to question number 2. Would you be able to do your work as effectively without a background in women and gender studies? No, I don't think I would be as effective without my background in women and gender studies. I feel like women and gender studies really opened doors for me as far as the way that I think about things, and why. And those are tools that I have used throughout my whole career. So I feel like I wouldn't have been as effective in the impact that I have brought to the positions that I worked at. So I've been able to say, hey, why don't we take a step back and like look at this from a different perspective? And the perspectives that I'm asking for us to take a step back and look at, they're coming from what I learned in women and gender studies. So no, I don't think I would have been as effective in my roles had I not had the experiences and the knowledge that I gained from women and gender studies. Question number 3. What advice would you give to students who are majoring or minoring in women and gender studies as they go on the job market? So I have a couple pieces of advice, and this is advice that is specific to women and gender studies students, as well as students who like fall under the umbrella of the humanities and social sciences in general. As an anthropology major, as someone who studied women and gender studies and African American studies, I knew not to expect to find those things as job titles. So that would be a piece of advice that I would give you. It would be awesome if you could find a job that was like women and gender studies, researcher, practitioner, manager, whatever it was, but that is going to be really hard to find. So my advice would be to think about the skills that you learned in women and gender studies. Think about the topics that really resonate with you and the skills that you learned from those topics, and then look for jobs that fit in to those categories. So what is something that you really are passionate about within women and gender studies? Look for jobs with those titles. For me, it was more about skills. So I knew that I wanted to be in research. So I was looking for research positions that were doing research on topics that I felt interested in. So I would say, like, don't get discouraged if you don't find a specific job title, or if you're not seeing job titles or things like that that you feel like are exactly what you're looking for. I would say take a look at the company, take a look at their values, take a look at the things that you'll be doing in those roles and the skills that you have, and see if that's what's connecting. Because I will tell you, I feel that the skills that I've gained from women and gender studies can be applied in so many different settings, not just research. which was my experience. But I think that like you are being geared up with skills that can cross fields, cross industries, and it's really special. So don't get discouraged if you don't see a specific job title. Really think about what you want in a job and the skills that you have, and look for that within the job description as you get onto the job market. Also, it's just really easy to get discouraged being on the job market in general, and I like to remind people that their experience, what they've done, is really valid. So if you feel like, weeks, months, this is taking longer than you're expecting, just kind of like remind yourself, you've worked really hard, you have lots of things that you're bringing to the table, and once you find that position that's right for you, like it's gonna come, it's gonna happen. Just try and I know this sounds a little cliche, try and stay as motivated as you can, because it's gonna be tough. It's, a lot of times things don't happen right away. Okay, I'm over my time, but I'm gonna keep going. What are some of your favorite courses and opportunities at Mason as a woman and gender studies student? What were some of your favorite courses? Oh, wow, that is a great question. I loved Intro to Women and Gender Studies. That was great. I think that was maybe the second or third Women and Gender Studies class that I took. That was after I was like, okay, this is like what I want to minor in. I took Intro to Women and Gender Studies, and I really loved it. I really also enjoyed the graduate course that I took around, I think it was feminist research methods, because I've always been really interested in research, and that was a very hands-on class that I felt geared me up well for what I went on to do as a researcher for my career. So yeah, definitely intro, feminist research methods, and there's so many. I wish I had like a list of all the women and gender studies classes that I took, and then I could really like pick them out and like tell you why I loved them. But yeah, they're all great. But if I had to choose two that like really stick out to me, those would be the two. Okay, last question. In light of our theme, why does women and gender studies matter outside of the academy? Oh gosh, that's a really good question. Okay, I feel like outside of the academy, needs more people with the background and skills that you gain from women and gender studies. We need these perspectives, and not just the perspectives, but also like the tools to talk about it that you will gain from being involved with women and gender studies. The theory, just like that overall like perspective is something that is really needed outside of the academy. I feel like when you're in the academy, it's much easier to tap into those schools of thought, and to be surrounded by people who think similarly, they're on the same page as you, they know the theories that you're referring to, they know the perspectives that you're talking about. But once you get out of the academy, that need is still there, but it can be like harder to find those people who are on the same page as you, and oftentimes you might be the person who's like opening these doors, asking these questions, and that's why women and gender studies is so important, because if you're not there to ask those questions might not be getting asked, and they're all really important. And so, yes, like there's no reason, I can't think, there's like no reason why women and gender studies does not matter outside of the academy. It's important in any field that I can think of. There are aspects of women and gender studies that are very important, one, and two, need to be amplified. So I'm all about women and gender studies outside of the academy, and I'm so glad that this event is being put on. Thank you so much for inviting me to participate.